Welcome to Elevated with Nthamana.
Hello, Mr. Anil. How are you?
Hello, Sir Nthamana. How are you?
I am doing well. I am doing great. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Elevated with Nthamana. Of course, I am Patrick Nthamana.
And here you have Han.
So, what are we doing here?
Oh man, we're telling them a story about what we're about to get up to here, right?
Nah, this is amazing. So, this is just a really wonderful introduction into amazing podcast that we decided to come up with. It's a combination of podcast and it's a combination of a travel vlog. And within Elevated with Nthamana, we want to tell some fascinating stories. And these stories are going to entail having great conversations with some amazing athletes that have achieved quite a lot in their careers. Some professionals in the realm of, whether they're lawyers, they're doctors, they're investment bankers, or in the realm of politics, diving with some politicians, finance ministers, whomever it is. We just want to tell some amazing stories of perseverance, dealing with hardships along the way before success, because I think a lot of times what people kind of see is the end result, but they don't really see what goes into all of the work that goes before that. But before we get into any of that, I think it would be nice to just take a step back and just tell the entire world who we are. And I'll give you the pleasure of starting.
Oh man, putting the burning in my hands.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, yeah, man. I'm from West Africa, Telugu, as you know.
Right.
I was born and raised there, coming from
West Africa.
from West Africa to a first world country. Right? I mean, it's you place in this. You go from this distressed place that doesn't really have a lot of order, more chaos than order, I say, right? And then you go into this place where it all at first seemingly seem all so well put together. Also, obviously, as you live here, you start to realize what the chaos of this place is,
Right.
which is very different from the chaos you face back home. But
It's a different kind of chaos.
it's a different type of chaos, right? And I mean, I will lie. I like the beautiful facade of all the infrastructure that's around.
Amazing.
Yeah, no, it was crazy. I remember getting here, man, getting off the plane and just seeing how it's like, how we watch Star Wars and whatnot. It's a whole new world, bro.
Right. If you landed on another planet.
My goodness, it's a whole new world.
Right.
So that's always been quite fascinating to me, and I want to get into more of the what growing up there was like and whatnot. But yeah, let's go. Where did you grow up at?
Okay. So stepping back, I think, everyone, welcome again to Elevated with Nthamana. Nthamana, if you ask what that means, Nthamana actually means troublesome. Troublesome, but I kind of don't like to think of it as troublesome in a mischievous kind of way. I like to think of it as troublesome in the idea of being very stubborn in pursuing certain things that need to be done, but certain things that I would like to achieve. And regardless of what that is, I will stick to it until it's somewhat achieved, or at least I gave it my best. But just going back, I am from Sierra Leone, born, not so much raised, born in Sierra Leone, grew up there for a little bit of my life, and then moved to the United States, Roanoke, Virginia, in particular, roughly around the same age as you. And it was quite an experience, again, coming from Sierra Leone, specifically in Freetown, the capital. And but I spent a lot of summers, going to the countryside, or as we call it back in Sierra Leone, going to the provinces. There you go. But I really enjoyed it. I think having that experience as first, like, few years of my life in Sierra Leone was just very, very interesting. I got to grow up with my grandmother on my mother's side, and then eventually, when I started elementary school, I grew up with my uncle because my dad was already in the States studying, and my uncle was in politics. He was he was like a top minister within the government. So he had a very prestigious position politically. So obviously we went to like international schools, private schools. So I had a really interesting childhood during the school year. I would obviously growing up with my uncle, I grew up with politicians. I went to like the tennis clubs. I went to the apple clubs. But in the summertime, I grew up with my grandma in the village and my mom. And that was really amazing because, you kind of get to see two completely different worlds, right? You see this one side where it's like, you get police escort to school. And then in the summertime, I'm just climbing mango trees. I'm climbing guava trees. I'm throwing rocks at like oranges and picking up cacao. So I think just having that experience was just super, super amazing. And then obviously we'll get more into just the whole transition of coming to America and what that was like. But in terms of this podcast, sort of what prompted the idea was actually a random coincidence. Accidentally running into you.
Yes.
You want to tell the story about how we met?
Yeah, so I think it was a night out. You were with some lady from.
I was with some lady friends. I was with like 4 or 5 lady friends.
Yeah,
Right?
with a couple of lady friends.
I think probably that's why you said hi to me.
Yeah, it's actually so funny because I was also with a couple of lady friends inside as well.
Right.
So they started filming, I was like, oh, one of us.
Right. It tells me only no one, right?
It looks no one, exactly.
Right.
I was like, there's a dog walking in here. All right. So one of your lady friends actually asked us for a smoke, and you and I engaged in conversation.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, where you actually, I think you asked me. You were like, where you from, buddy? And I was like, Togo.
Right.
And then you were like, okay. And then you said, West Africa, baby. And he said Sierra Leone.
Exactly.
And we dapped up, and the rest is history.
It's history, right? And I remember we had a few meetings, just kind of chatting up, grabbing drinks.
Mhm.
And along the way, we both realized we had a affinity for telling stories. By trade, obviously, I'm a banker by day, but I love telling these intricate stories.
Yes.
I love traveling, and obviously you're a creative individual in terms of what you do within graphic design.
Yes.
And we just decided, you know what, why don't we sort of put the two together?
Why not?
And tell amazing stories.
Exactly.
And in the process, get to travel, meet some amazing, fascinating individuals and tell their stories of perseverance, of hardship, and obviously of success, right? And then how do you maintain that success when you get to that level? Not only how do you maintain that success, but how do you stay humble while you're at that level? And most importantly, what do you do in terms of being able to sort of help and pull people along from where you just came from? So I think this podcast is going to be one of the most intriguing, and from a videographic standpoint, it's going to be quite fascinating because a lot of times you'll actually see myself doing the chatting with a guest, but a lot of times, you'll also see Anil sort of come into view because Anil does all the creative work on the podcast. That's his thing. Just all the creativity. We sit and we talk about how we want to sort of draft stories, and we just make it happen. Anil is a magician behind everything. So the structure of the podcast essentially is just, again, it's going to be conversational. There's going to be, audio versions.
Yes.
And then there's going to be visual versions. But regardless, you will still be able to find every single episode. This is episode number 1. You will find every single episode we do on basically every single podcast channel that there is out there. So whether it be Spotify, whether it be Apple or other mediums, But most importantly, you can find us on YouTube at Elevated with Nthamana. So please do subscribe, like us, and put in any notifications so that you don't miss any of our fascinating stories that we will be telling.
Hit that button. You know, we're ready to inspire some folks out there.
Right. And I think along the way, it's not just about inspiring other people, it's also about us being inspired
Yes.
by the folks that we have the pleasure of having a conversation with.
Right.
And I think it's also about inspiring each other.
It is.
And that's hopefully in turn the audience, you guys, can also hopefully get inspired from all the conversations that we'll be having.
Yeah, our hope is, you know, to transfer whatever energy that we're receiving from the blessings of these people who are giving us their time to
Right.
talk to us,
Right.
to find a way to turn that inward, right, and outward as well,
Right.
in a visual format and audio format that's pleasing enough.
No, it's amazing. So we'll kind of get to the next step. Let's talk a little bit about who we are as individuals, because I think in order for us to tell amazing stories, I think it's important that we tell the audience who we are. Who is Aniel? Who is Patrick? And that obviously goes back to our childhood, right? For me, it is growing up in Sierra Leone, growing up in Freetown. Like I said, I was very fortunate to grow up in two, I would say, vastly different environments within Sierra Leone. On one end, I grew up with sort of the affluent politicians, and then on the other hand, I grew up with just quote unquote what you would consider like your middle class family in Sierra Leone, right? My mother's side and my dad's side is very political. My mom's side is very, it's a big family, and my grandma just basically, she never went to school a day in her life, but her and my grandfather, who passed before I was born, made sure that all their kids were educated, right? And because they understood the power of education, they understood that education could get their kids out of poverty, could basically change their lives, right? And when I came along, that was always, education was always embedded into my life and what I was going to do. But at the same time, it was very interesting, very nice that I got to see how my grandma raised lemon. And in the summertime, I remember vividly just being a kid. My grandma would carry me on her back and we would go to the farm. So everything that they cooked, everything that they had came from generations of this farm that was just handed over. So if you talk about orange, you talk about pineapple, like fruits, veggies, they would set aside what they needed to cook and sustain themselves. And then any surplus they would sell. So that's how she got money to pay for my mom to go to school, especially after my grandfather died. Because my grandfather he went to World War II, because obviously Sierra Leone is a British colony. So during part of World War II, a lot of the Africans, the British actually recruited Africans to go help them fight. And my grandfather was one of them. He was actually a medic. So when he went back to Sierra Leone, he never formally went to school and became a pharmacist. But because of what he learned within the military, he basically opened up his own pharmacy. So because of that, he was able to just be very well off. And in those days, back in the late 50s, 60s, basically he ended up marrying several women. So because of that, my mom has all these siblings, but I mean, it's crazy how DNA works. I mean, they're all like literally identical twins.
Yeah.
And obviously growing up in that, family structure, I have loads of family members, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the dynamic of, and then when he passed, it became a struggle for my grandma to be able to take care of all the kids. And then again, it became every family fending for themselves. But again, through that and the kindness of my grandfather, people would just say, you know what, these were you kids. You took care of us when you were in a place of high level. You put some of us through school. Now it's time for us to do the same. So because of that, my mom and her siblings were able to go to, I guess, high school and some of them universities, paid for through the kindness of my dad and through scholarships. And then obviously on my dad's side, obviously that was a little bit different because, like I said, they were very political. And because one of my uncles, my dad's first cousin, had attained a very high level, I basically kind of lived in two different worlds, right? A world of politics and a world of just normalcy. But at the same time, they say, in Africa, when you get mixed up with politics, you have to be ready with the good and the bad. And for me, that bad came in April of 1992 when there was a coup d'etat in Sierra Leone. It was the first time ever in my life I had gunshots. I didn't even know what they were. I was in probably like fourth grade. And all I remember was just like a firecracker. And I just thought there were fireworks. And then all of a sudden, you started hearing sirens, military vehicles going up and down. And not too long after, one of the vehicles came to get me. My uncle wasn't in town. He was actually in London at the time on a business trip. Long story short, we went home. And then, so obviously all the commotion went on around 9 a.m., 10 a.m. in the morning. And by 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we had a bunch of military guys come to the house looking for my uncle.
Wow.
And it was sort of a scary thing because these guys in full military fatigues showed up to the house, AK-47s drawn. And of course, I had seen guys, in Africa, a lot of the military police carry weapons. You see the same thing when you go to Europe, right? Like, for instance, you go to Italy, you'll see France, strapped, especially at like train stations, airports, like very visible. So obviously I had that, and of course some of the security we had growing up, obviously I'm used to it. But to have one drawn at you,
Different story.
coming out of from hiding underneath the bed because they were looking for your uncle. And I remember we had back in Africa we had those big like direct satellite TVs, right? To watch TV. They were massive, right? So imagine your direct TV satellite that's what the size of this. Multiply that by like 20.
Yeah.
Those
They
big,
were huge.
they were shooting at them because they wanted to destroy. And then I remember they went back to the generators because we have energy issues in Africa.
Yeah.
So we had generators, they shot those as well. But that was a very traumatic experience. So, well, long story short, because my uncle wasn't there, they just basically took whatever they needed to take from the house and just left. Shortly after my uncle came back for London after the coup, he was under house arrest for like 3 years. Eventually ended up living a nice, prosperous life. But then it was time for us to leave Sierra Leone. And I moved in. My dad at that time, he was already done with all his undergrad and his master's. So growing up in Roanoke was completely different. I had grown up with mainly like Lebanese and Indians, because in Sierra Leone, we have a lot of them, especially at the international schools. They basically dominated. Matter of fact, we have Lebanese schools where it's just literally just for Lebanese, right? It is where like all the affluent kids and folks like that go. So moving to Roanoke was a little bit different because, mind you, in Africa, you can go to your next door neighbor at will and just like, hey, how you doing? You want to play? But in Roanoke, brother, man, I would literally wake up, go to school, come home from school. Mind you, this is at middle school, right? And it's just you do your homework, you eat dinner, and you go to bed. So it was kind of like really like, it was weird. It was a weird setup. Like I wasn't used to it. The structure was different. So I think the first 2-3 years of that level of life, you feel some sort of depression. But back in the day, we don't really call it depression, right? Especially, and within the African household, we don't call those things depression. You feel a certain type of way, and at the end of the day, you're just left to sort of deal with it, right? You're just left to deal with it without questioning why you feel a certain type of way,
Which is bad.
which is crazy. And I'm glad that now as adults, I can kind of go back. As adults, we can go back and sort of find what the issues are and try to reconcile them, rather than sort of store them here and never like talk about them or anything like that. Because I think mental health is super, super important.
It is.
But yeah, that's my growing up story. And yes.
Yeah, speaking of untangling knots, which is really important. Growing up, I came from a really, just like you, both sides of my family are very, very, very different. But I mean, to the point where the difference are so large, they're so significant that there really wasn't too much into research to the mom's side with Fallon, my dad's side. So they didn't get along at all, actually. Wow, which is very, very area. So oftentimes the assigned relative between, spending time with my mom's family, which I spend most of the time down, and then the time is spending time with my dad's family, right? Well, because he was here in the States already, obviously, when I was like still pretty young, right? So again, majority of the time was raised by my mom, but obviously having lost that, father figure in some sense, meaning someone who's there who could provide directly, it made a big impact on me and my mama. So there was so much moving involved. Right. Like I went to so many different elementary schools. I went to so many different middle schools. I went to two different high schools. So, I mean, I've gone to more than like 9 schools. My goodness. So that leaves you in an interesting place because you just kind of get used to moving so much.
And was it hard to make friends and maintain those?
Yeah, actually. So that's one of the biggest points where you see a huge impact is at some point I started thinking, what's the point of continuing to make friends knowing that
You just gonna move.
I'm probably not just going to leave them behind again?
Right.
So that created a sense of hopelessness, which I've learned to master in a different way nowadays, right? But that definitely was very impactful. Oftentimes, I would also help my mom, like cooking food in the streets and selling it as a way to survive.
Right.
So that's a big part of why I love food so damn much. Reminds me of my time.
You're a big boy.
Big boy.
But speaking of food, is it jollof?
Oh,
What kind
man.
of food do you?
There are certain staples back there. Like, for example, a lot of people would do like fried yams, fried plantains, some goat meat, some real goat meat,
It's
man.
the
It's
West African food, yeah.
Yeah, man, the jollof,
the
right?
stew. And speaking of jollof, which one is your favorite jollof?
Oh, that's a war we're starting. That's a war we're starting there, man. But to be quite honest, oftentimes I think the fight. Oh, I mean, I think every African thinks their jollof is the best jollof, right?
West.
So oftentimes I feel like it's usually Ghana and Nigeria that a lot of people are going back and forth between.
Right.
But I'd like to take a step out of that bubble and actually challenge it and say Senegalese.
From they started it.
They started it,
Right.
dude. Cheboujen,
Right.
dude. Senegalese cheboujen, the original jollof. It's hard to beat it, man.
Right.
It's hard to beat it. It's pretty good, man.
No, the way for me with that entire argument, the way I approach it is, I think food is it's very loving, right? When someone offers you food and it comes from a place of love, they've poured something into it to say, you know what, here, I took the time to prep it. So for me, any day, any place, any moment, whoever offers me that jollof, whether it be a Nigerian jollof, Sierra Leonean jollof, Togolese jollof, Ghanaian, Cameroonian, Senegalese, Gambian, whatever, it's just at that very moment, that's the best. But I preface it to say, for me, the best food I'll ever eat in this world is anything that is prepped by my mother, and God rest my grandma's soul, anything that she prepped while she was alive. Nothing like it, right? Beautiful. But I say all that to say that I appreciate everything as long as there's love behind it.
Yes,
and that's my thing. That's how I sort of reconcile the whole war.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, flavors are different.
Yes.
I may like one thing and you may not.
We have such different ballads,
Exactly.
all of us, right? And
Exactly.
it's funny I say Senegalese, but I'm coming from a perspective of cuisine, palates, originality, and so forth on. But I would agree with you, man. I've had jollof from so many different places, and
Exactly.
they all have their own flavor factor that makes them special and unique
In their own
to not just the country.
Right.
You can break it down to a house,
The region. Yeah.
The region.
Everything.
I mean, it's insane, right? So, yeah, man, it all has this uniqueness. So, I think there's a lot of beauty in that. Yeah.
That's amazing. let's go back a little bit and talk about, first coming to America. I remember when I moved to America, it was around Thanksgiving, right? And just little things like I came here, it was getting cold.
Yeah.
I'd never felt cold like that.
That's crazy because I came right before New Year's.
Nah, so I came, but I remember I landed at JFK.
Yeah.
And my dad drove all the way to so I think it was JFK to DC, but it wasn't called Reagan then. I think it was called
something
Nash, yeah, something like that. This is like in the early 90s. And so I remember my dad drove 4.5 hours to come pick me up from there. And the funny thing is I had never met my dad physically. So my dad obviously was always there, was always sending stuff for us. You know, when you're in Africa, anything that comes from America is like glorified, right?
Yes.
So before every school year, he would send like trunks of like clothing for school, my shoes, book bag, school supplies. But I never met him because he was there getting his education, getting papers and all that stuff. So when he finally settled and got green card and all that stuff, then I was like, okay,
Got it.
so when I met him for the first time, because he left when I was 3-4 months old.
So you were really young.
Yeah, because he had a scholarship to come study abroad. He went to the University of Rochester. So imagine meeting your dad for the first time and you don't even know who this guy is. Because remember back in the day, we didn't have WhatsApp, we didn't have FaceTime, we didn't have all these things. It was a symbol, it was letters initially. It was letters, right?
Yes.
And in Sierra Leone in particular, for you to call someone, you had to go to a specific building, right, to make international calls. So there's usually a long queue. So like I remember my mom and I would be in that queue probably for like 40 minutes, 1 hour, sometimes hour and a half. And back in the day, you pay whatever amount and you could only talk for like 2 minutes and then the money runs out. So
we're the conversation so much more interesting with the time approach.
And you're still talking, right? So now, I mean, when you think about technology, right? You think about FaceTime, someone could literally be in Azerbaijan and you're literally FaceTime and then seeing what it look. I mean, it's just super interesting. So I feel like it makes things a lot easier now. But back in the day, we didn't have that. So when I met him initially, obviously we talked, we wrote letters, but it was weird seeing him in person. Of course, knowing that this is my dad, and obviously it was that African type of growing up vibe. My dad is a very smart, articulate guy, good in math, good in finance, which is why I went into investment banking. But for him, it was never like, come here, let me give you a hug. It was like, listen, did you do your homework?
Self-love,
right?
yes.
Whereas my mom is the exact opposite. Where my mom is just like, oh, how are you? Right? So very nurturing.
Very nice.
But at the end of the day, I just realized that, I used to resent my dad, to be honest with you. But then eventually I came to the realization that it's okay. There's different forms of, how you express love, right? My dad's way of expressing love was, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to allow you to go to like undergrad, and I didn't pay a dime. So imagine that I had no student loans going to undergrad. My housing, my tuition was all covered by my father. And he took a lot of pride in that, saying, he came from Africa, came here with nothing, made something out of himself, became a banker. And now he's paying for 3 kids to go to American schools, and he covered cost and tuition. So, but in return, all we had to do was bring his. So there was no messing about. So, and the minute you came home with like a B or God forbid a C, bro, like some days my stomach would just turn. I took an exam.
The fear
of what the conversation
doing inside you.
what the conversation was gonna be.
When you get home, you feel like you feel young. Your soul is just gonna.
I know.
So
just even like when the door would open, like when the garage door would open when my dad came home and I got to be on an exam, bro. It's like you start feeling the shivers, right? I know, right? But it's the level of love, it's the level of respect that you have for him, and it's the level of dedication that he put into making sure that I remember specifically some days my dad and I would be up till 12 doing like algebra or geometry or trig, right? No, so when I went to JMU, I knew I wanted to be a banker, and I knew for me to become, get into investment banking, I had to study my butt off. So that's what I did. ended up majoring in finance and then accounting, and I have a minor in marketing as well. So from there, I was able to work for Credit Suisse. From Credit Suisse, I worked for some other banks, and then eventually moved to DC, went to grad school at Georgetown, and now I'm at a multilateral banking institution. And it's been amazing just to see that journey of just what the mind can achieve. And when you put effort into whatever it is that you want to do, what you can sort of accomplish. And because of that, I've traveled so much with my current role. It just literally gave me the idea of, you know what? Why don't I do something where I can sort of combine travel and having conversations with people and sort of learning the ideas of success. And that's literally what Elevated with Nthamana is. It's about elevating the conversation in Europe where we can all achieve the best versions of ourselves. For sure. And in so doing, these conversations are going to be with some amazing individuals. It's going to be some of the world best athletes, right? Some of the most interesting, folks you made in time, from musicians to fashion designers to beauty experts to some amazing lawyers and doctors and people from just your day-to-day walk of life.
A lot of that.
A lot of that. And I think I want this conversation to sort of be for everyone, whether you're in middle school, trying to figure out what life is, or you're in high school trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to study, right? Because we may have a lawyer here that might be talking about different things about lawyer, whether it's corporate law, tax law. You're like, this seems interesting. Or we may have a doctor here that's like, I'm an orthopedic surgeon, or, I'm a anesthesiologist, or I'm a ER doctor, emergency medicine. You might be like, this works for me, right? And I want people to be sort of intrigued by that. Or you might be, okay, I'm a commercial real estate guy, or I do residential, or I do investment banking. Maybe this sounds better for me. Or I'm just a politician, or I'm a lobbyist in the case of DC, right? So whatever works for you, we want to give people the avenues to say, you know what, this is an amazing thing. And I want to take the time to listen to it, to explore it, and to say it works for me. And it might even work for an adult who is currently trying to transition from one career path to another. So what's your American coming to America story?
Oh man. Yeah, so just like you, I think, some of the most exciting times back home was when, receiving like cool gifts, right?
Right. Because you were the cool kid in school, yeah? With the sneakers.
And that always felt really cool in those moments.
Right.
So, coming here was really interesting because I also was really young when my dad left. Not as young as you, but still really young, right? So you don't really get to fully develop that relationship like you're supposed to, right? There's parts of it that don't feel the same. Huge gaps, huge, man. So essentially, I remember getting here in this bright pink sweater my mom made me.
And back in the day, that was really cool thing, huh?
Yeah. Bright pink sweatshirt. I'm just like, my goodness,
The African eyes, all right.
Yeah, man, it was something out of a comic book, bro.
Instead of coming to America with luggage, you came with a
She's trying to get thick, bro. But she's trying to just embellish me.
Of course.
In her love with her hand knitted sweater. Right. But yeah, man, it's so interesting because when I was younger, I hated that sweater because I think I remember I didn't know that kids can be brutal.
Of course.
Kids can be extremely brutal.
Of course.
So obviously, like school experience, right?
Right.
Not speaking English.
Right.
I mean, you get made fun of. You're the African doofy scratcher.
A lot. Right?
You're the African doofy scratcher.
You remember someone called me Punta Kinte once? I didn't even know what it meant.
Me neither.
Because I've never watched Roots.
Yeah.
And guess what? It was a black kid.
Yeah, of course.
Because it was an African American. And the funny thing is, my middle school was 95% white, right? So a lot of the African Americans they were very well off, well to do. So when the fact that I was Black African with an accent and everything, because it's British, English, right? Because I remember once. let, me, let me tell you a funny story. I remember once I was trying to be so cool, right? Because remember, we speak like English, right? In Sierra Leone. So like the word cute, right? Like, like, like your pink sweater, right? Your pink sweater is cute, right? So, so cool, bro. Listen. So every single time I'm just hearing these kids, mind you, I'm in like 7th grade, right? And all they keep saying is, "Oh, this is cute. This is cute. This is cute." So one day, I was trying to be cool, right? We had the lockers, right? I think I was in between periods. So I was switching from like maybe English class to math class, and they were talking, and I'm trying to get in the conversations. So someone had a nice shoe, right? So instead of me being like, "Hey man, I like your shoe, it's nice," this is what I said. This is what I said. I said, "Your shoes are very good." I said, "Your shoes are very good." And the kid,
Oh my god.
just stood there, right? For 3 minutes. 3 minutes, just stood there and was like, "What?" And I was like, "Your shoes, they're very good." And I could just feel, like, shut the hell up, you know? But bro, so think about it, bro. I said, "Coot." So then I went home and I told my dad, and my dad was like, "No, it's not coot. It's cute." It's these little things, right? It's
Oh my god.
it's when you're trying to assimilate, there's so much, so much headache to go through, so much.
Oh my god.
But stuff like that builds character. It really does. It really builds character.
Oh my gosh, man. Bro, this guy is so big.
Yeah. And then so when I got called Kunta, I was very confused. It's only when I watched Roots, the series, and I understood what he meant by
Oh my god, bro.
I was like,
Oh,
bro, it was like crazy. It was like
oh my god.
it was like block and block racism.
Oh my
But you
god.
know what? I still remember. But believe it or not, we actually became really good friends.
Yeah, man.
We became good friends because listen, this was back in at this point I think probably 8th, 9th grade.
Yeah.
So my middle school, 9th grade is high school, right?
Yeah.
But my middle school, 9th grade is in my middle school.
Wow.
The actual physical building.
Okay.
My high school didn't start until like 10th grade through 12th
Yeah.
because of like the district and the neighborhood lived there. So when this happened, it was just really like interesting because in a way, I kind of got to understand little things about American culture.
Oh yeah.
So
Very
very,
different.
I think, like I said, I grew up with majority white people in Virginia. I grew up in Southwest Virginia in Roanoke. So a lot of my friendships, believe it or not, were actually just so I've always been comfortable
Right.
being around
Everyone, really.
everyone.
Mhm.
And it's so funny because a lot of times people kind of look at me and he's like, "Yeah, you're not acting Black." I'm like, "What the hell is that supposed to mean?"
Yeah,
You know what I
what I
mean? I'm African.
Yeah.
Not so long ago, you were calling me Kuta.
Right.
What changed?
Yes.
Nothing
exactly.
changed, right? It's just the ideal of just maybe, I feel like, you should just be who you are. Just
Mhm.
carry yourself in a certain manner. This is not a Black way of acting. There's not a white way of acting. It's just be yourself,
Mhm.
right? And whether it's in fashion, whether it's in the way you choose to sort of, your appearance. But it was trying to be cool to be cool to in your own way, right? But no, that's my American experience. And yeah, well, continue.
Oh no, it's so funny because it's so relatable, right?
Right.
That's why it's so hilarious because with my first name, as you know, so throughout many countries in Africa, you get a name based on the day you're born,
Especially in Ghana, because that's more of the Ghana.
especially in Ghana, right? So yeah, I've got a couple of a couple of things when it comes to West Africa. It's not as total. Ghana has a part of it and all of that, right? As far as what makes us goes. But anyway, so I come here and the thing is my entire family called me Daniel. Right? But when you come here, the first thing that shows up on there, as your first thing is it's Kofi. Right. So, bro, I got hell for the name Kofi. Cause you know what they would say every time? They're like, it's coffee here.
This
There's
person.
coffee.
I'm not even those.
The first time they ever said do it broke me. The first time ever it broke me, bro. Cause they say coffee.
No.
The entire class was laughing before I would get him.
No, you see, for me, my middle name is Nthamana, which again, like I said, meant troublesome. But I figured from a very early age, not too many people really say Nthamana.
No.
But everyone at my dad's side, in particular, because it comes from my dad's side.
Yeah.
From my mom's side, my name is actually Sa,
Got it.
meaning I'm a firstborn son because I'm part of the Connors from the Diamond region of Sierra Leone, the Connor district. So if you ever watch Blood Diamonds or things like that, the diamonds, the region where the diamonds come from, that's where my mother's side comes from. That's actually the town I was born in.
Yeah.
I was born in Connor. So shout out to my people in Connor, specifically Koidu. But Patrick is I'm Catholic. So Patrick is my baptism name.
Okay.
So I've always just gone by Pat and then Patrick. It depends. I grew up playing soccer, travel soccer, so on and so forth. So because of that, it depends on what phase of my life you met me. You either call me Pat or Patrick, or occasionally now I'm getting comfortable and allowing, because now I'm being African is cool, man. I think now I'm comfortable, expressing, this, like I want to use my Nthamana name a lot more, which is why I think with the podcast, I thought it was really, really important that it be called Elevated with Nthamana, meaning come and let's get to a different mindset and use my African name that I'm so proud of,
Yes.
And I think now with Afrobeats, the likes of, Burna Boy, Ambido, all these amazing artists, right?
And technology high as well.
Technology, right? Now you can go and live there on a laptop or on an iPad and just basically see, what life in Nigeria is like, what like in South Africa, Kenya, Rwanda, Mozambique, Sierra Leone, Togo, blah blah blah, and see that Morocco. Let's not forget North Africa, right? What it's like there. But at the end of the day,
We're finally humanized.
we're humanized, and the cultural aspect of it, whether you're in North Africa, East Africa, West Africa, or Southern Africa, it's a massive, massive continent. A Ghanaian and a Sierra Leonean are not even the same. Even two Sierra Leoneans are not the same. Like someone growing up in Freetown versus someone growing up in the provinces, two different experiences, right? Even someone growing up in one part of town versus the next part of town. We live in DC. Someone growing up in Southeast DC versus someone growing up in Northeast DC or Northwest, completely different experience, right? So how do you expect a massive continent that's nearly twice the size of Europe for people to be agnostic? It's not possible, but that's what they kind of want to share. And I think technology and having people kind of see things is changing that dynamic.
Yes.
Right? Africa has literally one of the largest population of kids young under 25 years old. And I want to say I'm a very proud African, but as much as I'm African, as much as you're African, I think American experience as well has definitely made us Americans. Because I think coming as a young kid growing up, we've spent way more time here in the United States than we have on the continent of Africa, right? So, and I don't want to diminish that, because I think growing up here culturally, the things we've been very Americanized, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity that I had, my family growing up here, having this culture, the education, and now having spent time in my career here. It's amazing, but also reconnecting with Africa, which we recently did with Morocco. Right? Physical on top of that, I was in Sierra Leone actually about a month ago, which was my first time in 12 years. And when we went to Morocco, it was your first time in like 23 some years continent. So it's good to sort of mix it up. And I think for me, that's how I want to live life. I want to live life sort of telling dynamic stories, using my experiences of growing up, in Africa, spending time in Europe, and growing up here in America, and just using that dynamic, not as a weakness, but as a positive, so that I can sort of take different instances and say, wow, these are my experiences, and this is how I can deal with X, Y, and Z.
Yeah,
What does that mean for you?
yeah, I love the way you explain it. I think we're multicultural children, and that really helps to open up perspective on how we view the world, our general viewpoints on whether it's politics, whether it's religion, whether it's philosophy. It's always beneficial to have a bucket, a pool of options to be able to pick from in order to really expand your knowledge base, right? Right. And that's why I'm so grateful to be able to have grown up in two societies that are so different in many ways, yet there are similarities, well, that align in some places, right? But I'm really grateful to have gotten the experience to just experience two completely different worlds. And I think because you and I both have that experience, it's easier for us to oftentimes connect with other people and also just make them feel comfortable. Because chances are we've been around.
Absolutely.
We've been around everyone already. You know what I mean?
And it makes it easy.
And it makes it so much easier. They can feel that acceptance, right?
I feel like stuff like that you can't fake,
No,
It's either it's in you or
and
it's
if you fake it, it will only last for so long.
right.
You know what I mean? That'll only last for so dang long.
Right.
So yeah, I think that is definitely something I'm very, very grateful for. And yeah, I mean, hopefully we can share that experience with
Absolutely.
everyone else, because I am also very grateful that we get to go to the places we go to, right? Because
I'm looking forward to it. I mean, matter of fact, we're doing this episode now. I think in 2 days we'll be flying off to England, to France, and then to Spain to tell amazing stories. You'll have to stick around and just see what those episodes are going to be. But it's going to be fascinating. Earlier you mentioned something about philosophy. Are there any books, whether it be philosophical books, religious books, or just fiction or nonfiction, that inspire you in your day-to-day life?
yes, absolutely. I would say Meditation by Marcus Aurelius is one of my favorite books. I have more than one favorite, but yeah, that is one of my favorite books. Like, it speaks to, I mean, it's just his daily life that he happened to journal, but ruling a kingdom as big as he was ruling, what he learned and what you get out of reading his material in his journals is this idea of stoicism, right? Which is accept the things that you can change.
Yeah, Socrates.
Socrates also, right. So all of them like kind of fall in line with that stuff.
Right.
But essentially, with stoicism specifically, it's saying regardless of what's going on in life, embrace it and be.
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, change the things you can change and accept the things that you cannot change.
Ooh.
Right.
And always try to improve it together.
Yes. So I love that book because it's very practical about how to find some sort of balance, whatever that is. Right. But to find some sort of balance and deal with all of the pains of life, essentially, right? Without too much trouble.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's quite, stoicism is quite the philosophy.
That's amazing.
How about you? What's your favorite book?
For me, I'd always say it's actually a book by the Dalai Lama. It's called The Word of Happiness. If you've never heard of it, please do go check it out it's on Amazon. You can find it there. The reason why I love The Word of Happiness, if you obviously understand the Dalai Lama, I'm Catholic. But again, growing up in Sierra Leone, it's a very, very multicultural. And from a religious standpoint, it's about 60-40 or 50-50, depending on who you ask. Meaning, nearly half the population is Christian, half the population is Muslim. But regardless, when speaking of Ramadan is coming up, in Sierra Leone, literally you'll find Christians marrying Muslims, Muslims marrying Christians, and Christians observing Ramadan and Muslims observing Easter. It's just the culture. And obviously growing up in an environment like that, when I think I was in 8th grade, in the summer, rather than sitting outside playing Sega Genesis and playing video games all day, remember old school Sega Genesis? Or like I remember when PlayStation 1 came out, my dad was like, nah, you don't want to pick up a book. And my dad had a library. So he was like, I want you to go in the library, pick a book. Every 2 weeks, I want you to finish that book and write me a summary. So the first time he ever made me do that, I went into his library and I was trying to find the smallest book to read.
Yes.
I actually ended up reading 2 books that summer. The first one was The Road of Happiness by Dalai Lama. The second one was actually the autobiography of Malcolm X, which 2 of my favorite books. And then I also read Gifted Hands by Dr. Ben Carson.
Okay.
Amazing book. So those are obviously if I had to pick like my top 15 books, they're right there. But the Gifted The Road of Happiness by the Dalai Lama is important because it teaches you basically how do you attain happiness, right? Happiness is quite subjective. You don't necessarily, you just try to improve, do things one day to the next to become a better version of yourself.
Right.
And the example I always use with that is like like someone who goes to the gym, like a bodybuilder. It's a process. If you want to work on your biceps or, work on your pectoral muscles or, work on your triceps, it takes time and consistency. And above all, it takes discipline.
Yes.
Right. And if you keep doing it daily and you follow the process in terms of getting the right number of sleep, eating the right food, because a lot of times most people think you just go to in the gym and you just pumping it. No, it's what you eat. It's getting the right number of sleep so that all that muscle that you've taught, it can repair itself. And then obviously putting in the work, right, in the gym itself with lifting weights. So over time, if you keep doing the same thing, you're consistent at it, you're bound to see results, right? But if you're just going to the gym, this on air, 10 minutes, let me take a selfie and then get out, and you wonder why you're not either gaining or losing, whatever your goal is, of course, you're not putting in the work, so you won't see any results. So for me, reading that book was just very, very important in terms of how do you set goals? How do you get to a place in your life where you find balance? And obviously, if you've read anything about Buddhism, it's about balance, right? So for me, that was very important. Before we close, I just want to close it with maybe what is a quote that you sort of live by on a daily basis that sort of inspires you? When you wake up in the morning, you say, you know what, today I'm going to conquer this, do A, B, and C, check it off my to-do list. What is that one quote that sort of like you live by? Or at least, or maybe a philosophical mindset that you go by?
Oh man, that's a really good question. I would say, as far as like go and get it, Muhammad Ali. Only last night I murdered a rock, injured a stone, hospitalized a brick. What's so mean? I make medicine sick.
That's sick.
And I wrestle with an alligator.
Oof.
And tussle with a wild. Ain't come fly nigga dollar and jack. Last night I hit the light switch in my bedroom. Was in the bed before the room was dark. Fans. I love that, man.
That's amazing. I would have to say mine is one with Mike Tyson. I want to hit your heart. Oh, you saw? No, absolutely not. But I do love Mike Tyson. I think he's an amazing guy. I think for me, it's a great quote by the philosopher Seneca, and I'll paraphrase it. It's something to the effect of, it's not that we don't have enough time. It's to the point that we don't effectively use the time that we're given, right? So we basically waste the time that we're given. So in that realm, I want to live a life where I maximize every single day that God gives me. And I think we all should live to that philosophy.
Yes.
Tomorrow is never promised. And if we get a chance to be healthy, to move about, get up, do it.
Get it done.
Get it done. And be the best version of yourself. Even if you're not the best at something, work towards it. Because at the end of the day, I always strongly believe that hard work always beats talent. Right? So don't rely just on your talent. Put in the work, put in the effort.
Yes.
And through this podcast, Elevated with Nthamana, we will be telling stories about people who may perhaps have the talent, but they've also put in the work. Or people who didn't necessarily have the talent, but they've outworked the folks with the talent. And because of that, they've excelled and got into a certain place in their life. And they will come and share those stories with us.
That's right.
But most importantly, if they can't come, guess what we're doing?
We're heading right over
To tell their stories.
jetting. We're taking a train. We're taking that boat.
We're taking the bus.
And that, we're flying on a bird.
Anything. And again, thank you for tuning in to Elevated with Nthamana. As we said, I'm Nthamana. This is Aniel. Thank you. And please do follow us on YouTube, and that's Elevated with Nthamana. So please subscribe. Make sure you hit the bell for notification or new podcast episodes. And do please follow us on Spotify and Apple as well. And again, it's going to be a beautiful journey, and we hope to be telling some fascinating stories for years and years to come. So, merci beaucoup. Thank you. We appreciate you.
Welcome.
Welcome.
We're ready
We're out.
to have you.
Ciao, ciao. Peace.
Enthrall yourselves in our stories.